Hello everyone and welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast. I'm Ian Kroll and we are live on YouTube and I am joined by Joe Thomas and Gav Buckland and we're here to talk all things Everton. Joe, there's a lot of Everton news going around. But first off, how are things?
Yeah, all right, cheers. Just a very kind of busy morning already. I've been making calls since about 6:30 on different things. So, well, some updates.
Absolutely, we've got plenty of updates, a little bit of breaking news, a little bit of Branthwaite stuff and a little bit of stadium. Gav, I think the audio's working for this show. Let us know in the comments actually that the audio is working. If you were watching the show on Tuesday. Oh, sorry, it was me and Connor, wasn't it? I got a shouting at by someone for checking my phone to make sure that the audio was working, because there was a little bit of an issue in the show that we did last, and I cut Gav off mid flow. Sorry, but anyway, how are things?
Not a bad thing, cutting me off mid flow. A lot of people say I'm still recovering from my journey home from town last night, which extended beyond 60 minutes thanks to somebody appearing at Anfield in concert. It was an absolute traumatic experience.
What time did you leave?
About 4:15.
Well, I purposely left just after 2, and it was busy then.
Yeah.
So
I went from one gridlocked area to another. I'm still PST day, I think. But
Were you a little bit confused why everybody else was also wearing sequins skirts and
I
cowboy boots?
didn't get it. I didn't.
Thought you were unique.
Yeah, I was absolutely. Yeah, get a funny look driving in the car. No, I didn't even. I'm those things are way above my head, and I didn't know anything about it until I got home. My wife said to me, I think it's called Taylor Swift's.
You genuinely didn't know?
No.
Fair enough.
I just thought there's a lot of students out today and stuff like that, and it goes over my head, all that.
Gav is not a Swiftie, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
We're getting the comments in now, so audio was fine, so we can continue. I don't have to stress or sweat while I'm hosting and producing at the same time. Little bit of promo, as always. Give us a like, give us a share, give us a subscribe, and also leave us a 5-star, 4-star review on Apple, Spotify, and Apple Pods. And without a doubt, leave us a comment on today's stream. I think it's important because even though I've got, a list of questions, there's something that I definitely may have missed off, and it's always important for you guys to get your questions in, point of views across. Final bit of promo. Please give yesterday's show, Royal Blue Show on the YouTube channel, a watch. Sports editor Matt Jones and business or football writer Dave Powell with some great insight into the takeover, some great opinion, and it's without a doubt not out of date. It's in date and it's only about 35 minutes long. So where you get your podcast from, give it a listen or give it a watch. Let's move on then, guys. So today's agenda. Joe, we got some breaking news to start off with before we get on to Branthwaite and the takeover. I'm just going to let you take over.
Yeah, breaking news. I mean, there's probably been 2 elements of breaking news this morning, and let's be honest, neither of them are really a surprise. So, I mean, we're speaking now at just before 11:20. Well, 20 minutes ago, the club announced that Seamus Coleman had signed a new deal with Everton. 1-year extension means he will be playing in the last season at Goodison Park. I think, let's be honest, we all knew this was going to happen. Chris, someone from our stable was with Coleman in the tunnel at the Emirates after the final game of the season, and the comments that he reported were pretty clear that Coleman was keen to stay. He reiterated those comments whilst on Republic of Ireland duty last week. It's probably the least surprising news, and I think we'd fully expect Ashley Young to follow suit, judging by what he's been saying as well. So, significant boost for Everton, really, because obviously they had a threadbare squad last season. We're going to a very difficult summer for the transfer window. Having somebody that's as crucial to the dressing room as Coleman is will no doubt be a big help. And then the second bit of breaking news from a little bit earlier this morning is that Coleman will be playing in the last season at Goodison Park, and he'll be wearing a Castore kit. Again, one of the worst kept secrets going. I mean, we've made repeated reference to it in our coverage. It's something that's been known probably about for a good 6 months or so, but due to different contractual obligations and all sorts of other bits of planning, the club can only really release that information formally once they're at the end of their deal with Hummel, which has now come to an end. So Castore, Wirral-based local company that have been making kits for clubs and teams all around the world, will be supplying the kit. So we won't see the new kit. Home kit's not going to be released until next month, July. So I think the plan will be to get it out before the school summer holiday starts. But yeah, it's going to be a while before we officially have that kit unveiled and out there for release. But obviously, bit more breaking news, another development, record-breaking deal, all of which is good for Everton. And I think that probably one of the really good bits is they're taking up a kind of a founding partner status with the club and the new stadium. So one of the things the club's trying to do at the moment is with its sponsors, with its commercial deals, trying to tie them into something a bit more, because they'll be some of the first brands that will be involved in the club when it launches on the waterfront. That's obviously a sensible thing to do. It's a good thing to do. Every penny matters, for the club's finances, for PSR, for everything going. This is a huge opportunity for Everton, and we need them to exploit it, make the most of it, and that's what they're trying to do. So, Coleman next season wearing a Castore kit.
If you want to read Joe's article with regards to that, how are we pronouncing it? Castore?
I don't actually know. I don't think I'd ever thought about it. Probably Castore. I think I'm going wrong there. Yeah, Dave Powell, who's just been mentioned, did the story on Castore. Okay. I've done the story on Coleman, and then we'll come to it in a minute. Probably another bit of breaking news is that my story's just gone up on this, and that's details of another bidder in the running for Everton.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll come on to that into a minute.
Gav, let's come back to Seamus Coleman then. Breaking news this morning. As Joe mentioned, you can read his piece on the Liverpool Echo website.
Yeah.
Consistency key then, I suppose?
Absolutely. Yeah, said on the pod a few weeks ago, we need as many of the blocks that were in place last season in place this season for consistency, to just be able to tell the squad, do what he did last year. I know players are a year older, and I know like certain players that are a year older, and that creates a risk in itself. But I wouldn't want to be undertaking. I wouldn't be, leaving any of the squad at risk, making risky decisions going into the final season at Goodison, as Joe just said, going into Bramley-Moore. Just more of the same players with the same players would be my policy for next season. And and thus far the club appear to be quite keen, and that specifically Thirlwell and Dyson carrying that out in terms of the young offer Ghana guy as well. It's just extending people's contracts who in normal circumstances may not have got them extended, but I think that's very sensible. I would imagine Coleman's wages aren't going to hurt us as a club, given his age and his amount of game time he's got. The one sort of caveat and all that is I don't know what the position is around Republic of Ireland.
Yeah,
is whether we'll carry on playing. I'm not sure whether anything's been said. But I assume if you want him around the club at his age, would you possibly just want him focusing on Everton for the year? But he's a proud Irishman captain and stuff. He may want to carry on playing for the Republic. I'm not so sure. Doesn't have to resolve itself now. But a sensible deal for everybody. And let's face it, he's worth his weight in goal off the pitch as well, Seamus, isn't he?
Absolutely.
And so it's not, you don't just judge him about what he puts out on the pitch. It's what he does off the pitch, and he's still the playing figurehead for people, isn't he? He may not be the match day captain and stuff, but I think if you were asking Everton supporters, if you asked to name an Everton player now, he'd probably be the first one in people's heads, wouldn't he? He's still very much the leader as such, and he's been there for whatever is it, 18 years, for 17 years, something like that.
Well, let's take him into a 16th.
I think he joined his 16th playing season. Will it be next season? But sensible move, and I'm fully supportive of it.
I think it's one of those as well where you hope this is moving towards a situation where the send-off for Seamus, which is inevitably coming, is handled right. And I think that, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, but one of the things that I like the idea of and think would be something that would make sense would be, say for instance, because he fought long and hard about whether or not to sign a new contract last summer, and obviously we're now another year on and another year of his body getting older. But Everton haven't always managed the departures of significant players at the club at the end of their contracts. No. There's been a few that have had issues, Phil Jajalka and people like that. Well, Seamus is someone. Seamus is someone who clearly deserves a proper send off when he gets it. What this also potentially opens up to, obviously, he may end up staying for even longer. But there is also the potential for something like, say, the first game at the new stadium could be a Coleman testimonial or something like that, couldn't it? If he's still at the club this season, then decides to move on into coaching or something like that at the end of it. And, it would be nice it'd be quite fitting if the first player to wear the armband at the new stadium would be Coleman, and then maybe a nice idea would be for Branthwaite to be wearing the armband for the first official game at the club by the new stadium. But for reasons that we'll get onto, there's obviously questions around that.
Yeah, don't get our hopes up, Joe. Just on that, I couldn't agree more with both of you. I do think that is the right decision based on our current situation. But where does that leave the right side as a whole? Then, in your opinion, Gav? Joe's talked about Ashley Young. That is not signed, but it looks like it's good, promising for him to be signing. But we also know the issues. With basically how weak the right side has been over this season, and like you said, I think we've talked in the past that about Coleman's contract and whether he was to sign a new one. That is there some sort of line in his contract with regards to the Republic of Ireland? I don't know, but
I don't know. I mean, I'm just putting that out there. I mean, we mentioned that before. I think the person's forgotten about all this is Nathan Patterson, isn't it? Really, we've
not favoured by Dyche.
Been at the club 2.5 years. I know he's been injured for part of that. We spent, I don't know what was the deal for. Was it 8 million? Was it 9 million? I can't remember. So we in terms of transfers and wages, we spent quite a bit on him in 2.5 years. From last season, you would gather that he's certainly not first choice. He's probably, if Ben Godfrey's got in ahead of him on occasions, fourth choice at best. And if that's the case when you're at a club for 2.5 years, you've got to be looking at your own playing ambitions. Does he want another season stuck behind possibly Coleman, Young, Godfrey, even James Garner's played there at right back, hasn't he? And I think if I was him as a player, I'd be thinking, I'm getting a bit itchy feet here. And as a club, we can't really afford to have players that we pay transfer fees for and paying wages who were nowhere near the top of the pecking order, and he's the one I think whose future is a little bit uncertain, and it would be and the ball may be in his course a little bit. So that would be interesting to see how that pans out, really, because obviously Dyche doesn't fancy him. 2.5 years a club and you're nowhere near the first team. You've got to be looking, if I was ambitious, to be knocking on the manager's door saying, listen, can you help me out here?
Is he in the Scotland squad for the Euros?
Well, he's injured.
He's injured.
So that's so he's not in it because he's injured. I'm just thinking, like, would he think in his own head, stick it out one more year at Everton because I don't have to worry about actually.
I think the problem that Patterson's got is, and the problem that Everton have got is, both their current circumstances. Patterson has had a lot of injuries. He's been there for 2.5 years, 3 end of seasons. He's ended every season injured. Which means that he starts every summer at a disadvantage. It was a serious injury that it's a hamstring one that he left at stoppage time against Stamford Bridge in that hammering. He had surgery on it. He's progressing well. He's working at Finch Farm in the off season. The hope is that he'll be able to take part in pre-season when it gets up around the 8th, 9th of July next month. But I think the problem that Patterson has got is his own ambitions being stilted both at the club and further afield by his repetitive injury situations. And then on top of that, you have the problem that the club have got, whereby because the squad is so small and because some of the key players there are older and injury prone, or at least have to budget for injuries when you're dealing with the likes of Seamus Coleman, there's a reluctance there to let players go, even if they're not deemed as necessarily Dyche's trusted first 11 because of the lack of opportunities and the lack of cover. Nathan Patterson's going to be in that difficult scenario where there was interest with him in January from Bayern Munich, but Everton wouldn't sanction a departure because of the squad situation, and they may well find themselves in a similar position this summer whereby players go, and obviously they're trying to bring players in, but they don't have money to spend at this present moment in time. It's going to be a situation which is going to be up in the air for some time. But obviously, it's going to be a couple of weeks until he could even start to look around, because when it gets to passing medicals and things like that, that's going to be problematic. I think that there is a big opportunity. There's still a big opportunity for Nathan Patterson at Everton this summer by virtue of those situations. I think that there is a hole. There's certainly a hole for the long-term future, the right back position at Everton. If he was to get fit and to do whatever it takes to win over Dyche, there is perhaps a vacuum there that he could fill if he did the right things and if he was able to impress Sean Dyche. I think that Coleman we know is going to be around, but he isn't going to play 30. He's probably going to struggle to play 30 games next season. Ashley Young will probably be around, but he's going to be probably used as cover on both sides. Again, some good news from Vitaly Mykolenko. He's had MRI scans after the injury that he picked up against Moldova earlier on this week, and the belief is that it's not as serious as first thought. So Ukraine are actually keeping hold of him during the Euros. So that's a massive boost because, again, another player who's picked up the odd injury here and there. If he'd picked up a serious one now, then all of a sudden Everton are in a situation where they've got big questions over left back and right back going into this summer. They probably don't have that over left back now, given that Mykolenko's injury isn't as bad as first feared. But what they are going to have is a very close handle on whether or not he pushes to try and get back to Ukraine before he's actually ready, because he finished the season injured, so there's you could look at it and wonder it or fear that maybe he tried to rush back a recovery so he could be involved in the Euros. He can't do that again because of the long-term implications that could have on his body. I think the Ben Godfrey situation is an interesting one. I appreciate there are more pressing matters for us to talk about on this, but I very much see Ben Godfrey's position as something that's up in the air this summer. He's an ambitious player that's entering the last 12 months of his contract. He's not in Dyche's first team plans, really. He prefers to see himself as a centre-back as opposed to a full-back. He isn't getting an opportunity to do that under Dyche. I don't think he will get an opportunity at centre-back under Dyche unless Dyche was to end up moving towards a scenario of free centre-backs. Free centre-backs works for Godfrey. I think with Dyche, there's very much a belief that he very much prefers the towering physical presence of a centre-back. Like at the moment, we have Branthwaite and Tarkowski. We know that there's a big question mark over Branthwaite's future. I think it's fair to say from what we've seen of Dyche so far that his preferred backup of the options he's got, and Mason Holgate is also there, is clearly Michael Keane. That's not to say that if Branthwaite was to go, that they wouldn't search for another centre-back, but I think Ben Godfrey is someone that's looking at himself going into this Everton squad, a big stage in his career. For Everton, the last time they can get any money for him, and he's probably looking at that squad and he's thinking at best he's currently 4th choice centre back, 3rd choice left back, and I know he played a lot there towards the back end of the season at right back, but at the very least 2nd choice right back. And his best opportunity to play will be to play in a position that he doesn't favour. So with Everton obviously looking to kind of get money in and expecting player sales, Godfrey is somebody that it may well be in both parties' interests. If somebody was to come and offer a bit of money for him, I could see a scenario where he might depart, and again, when it comes to Patterson, that might give him another opportunity to maybe stake a claim for that right back, which is probably, I think, his last opportunity. He's probably got one more opportunity at the beginning of next season to say, I'm going to be the right back that leads Everton into Bramley Moore and going on there. If he doesn't take it, or if his body doesn't allow him to take it because he has been unfortunate with injuries, then then that's a problem. And I wouldn't be surprised if Everton are keeping an eye out for right-back solutions during this transfer window. Obviously, window opens today. That's a position where even if you were of the opinion that Coleman and Patterson were both 10 out of 10 right-back options, both of their injury track records suggest that you've got, if you're reliant on them, you might still have 10, 15 games where you've got to find an alternative solution for next season. So with that being in mind, I would expect the recruitment team to be keeping their eye out for maybe free transfers at right back.
Yeah.
I just got to come to you on this, Gav, because we've got a question, or we've got an opinion, I should say. So if you're just joining us, news broke this morning, Seamus Coleman has signed an extension with Everton for the further 12 months. But we've got a comment from Gravison. I don't think, he comments every now and again. I don't think it's the Thomas Gravison. Please, no more Coleman. He was finished 5 years ago.
Yeah, I get that completely. And but not I get the why you would say, why you would say that, but for me it goes back to the original point, is forget about people as individuals, just think about the squad as a whole. And I would sort of like, how the jigsaw puzzle that every squad is. We had like a jigsaw that was working, we had all the place the parts in place last season, mix and matching, but it worked. as evidenced in our 48 points before any deductions. And I think we don't want to sort of take that jigsaw apart this season. I totally get why you would say that, but for me, I'm just thinking the bigger picture around the collective, as you know, and the way that the squads are, and the way they interact, and so on and so forth, and the hierarchy. And I think Coleman's a key part of that, and retain him on that basis, and just want consistency really going into next year. But I could understand why you say that. But as long as his wages aren't hurting, then it's not really a problem. And the alternative is, obviously, well, we don't offer same as a contract, and Joe just said about well, we're looking for a right back this summer. That would make that pretty, if we let Coleman go, that would make that pretty mandatory. We'd have to look for a right back, which involves a transfer fee and wages. And the last thing we want, I think the club wants at the moment, is to see cash go out of the club, while we could have found that solution within the club at a lot less cost in the short term. As I said before, I think if we didn't have those issues, I couldn't see Seamus getting a contract. But because of those issues, that issue, and the playing side issue, I think we've been forced, I wouldn't say forced into it, but we've been in a position where actually it's the least damaging option for us.
Yeah, I agree. I
have a valid point.
Let's move on then, Joe. We haven't even got to the main talking points of the podcast. Obviously, a lot of breaking news, as we said, a lot of Everton news going around online. Jarrad Branthwaite, different reports circulating last night that he'd, agreed terms with Everton, or Manchester United were close to agreeing a fee with Everton. Is there an update? What are we talking here?
Well, I mean, the update is that the transfer window is open today. I think that's the update. Look, it's been very clear for a long time that Jarrad Branthwaite is an incredibly promising centre-back, and I've repeatedly said it and written it that Manchester United are one of the parties that are interested in him. There's always going to be interest before the end of this month because, for PSR reasons, everything suggests that Everton could probably do with a sale before the end of the month. Branthwaite is their hottest property. He's in a position where a lot of clubs are looking for a long-term solution. I think he is someone that could provide that for a lot of clubs and big-name clubs. And I think that there are probably two elements that developed relatively recently that are helpful for Manchester United's hopes. One is they won the FA Cup final, which means that they have a place in Europe this season despite finishing in 8th. That opened up more opportunity for them to sign players in terms of the regulations. To a bit of a more long-standing one, but the Jim Ratcliffe Ineos influence there. Clearly, it feels like they're going to move towards a bit more of a ruthless, sensible strategy towards the transfers. I think they have a lot of issues at centre-back anyway, and Branthwaite is someone that could solve their problems for 10 years. I genuinely believe that. I think he is a future England captain. And then the other one, and this is probably unfortunate, it was unfortunate for him, and I think undeserved, and I think it's unfortunate for Everton as well, is the fact that he was ultimately omitted from the England squad for the Euros. So when you look at the two players that were most likely to command a significant fee for Everton this month, they're probably Amadou Onana and Jarrad Branthwaite. I think there's a clear preference for Everton. Amadou Onana is the player that they would look to perhaps... They'd be most content with selling this month to get over any PSR hurdles. Then they can spend the summer trying to make sure that they can put up a fight as much as possible for Jarrad Branthwaite to make sure they at least get market value for him. But obviously Amadou Onana's at the Euros, which complicates the picture on that front. Jarrad Branthwaite isn't, which creates a bit of an open pathway for him. There's different kind of reports overnight as to whether or not Man United have agreed personal terms for him. That's always, I find it a little bit difficult, these kind of stories and comments, because really it should be clubs first and then you get onto personal terms. So you're never quite sure. Look, Branthwaite's got good people around him. He's grateful for the opportunities he's had at Everton, and I think he's more than aware that the playing time that he has got at Everton has been something that's incredibly valuable and would be incredibly valuable to him next season. But obviously, if someone like Manchester United come knocking around and they have the money to get past Everton's reluctance to sell him and desire to keep hold of him for next season because of how important, how good he is, then it becomes a difficult thing for anyone to turn down. I think there's still work to do on this front, But look, Manchester United have been interested for a long time. They were always likely to make efforts and overtures towards him this month, even if it's just testing the waters. Everton will want to command a very high fee for him, probably £75 million plus. How able they are to do so will depend on the finer details as to where they are of their PSR. You know, are they £20 million out, or are they £40 million out, or are they, whatever. I think one of the interesting ones, probably an interesting conversation that I know a lot of fans would be having in their head. It's a bit harder probably to discuss on a more official platform, but would be Everton 2 years ago claimed they lost out on £20 million for Richarlison by doing the right thing and selling him before the end of the football financial year to try and comply with PSR, which we know they still failed to do. I'd be interested to see what would happen if Manchester United lowballed Everton, and whether you then have a decision to make as to if you can't sell anybody else, is there a conversation which says you take the risk of another PSR points deduction?
A lot of people saying that
rather than lose out on maybe £20 million, because it could be something like that. The danger for Everton is, I'll finish it because I've said this several times, I've written it several times, but there is a way in which Everton can have a very good transfer window despite being in a situation that they are financially and regulatorily, if that's even a word. There is also a very... But there is also the likelihood of a very frustrating one. Everton are very much at the mercy of the regulations and of other clubs and their interests.
Yeah.
The good scenario here would be if someone comes in for Amadou Onana, offers Everton enough for them to be comfortable from a PSR perspective. Amadou Onana is a very talented player. They appreciate his talent at Everton, but I think it's clear that he's ambitious and clearly views the club as a stepping stone. Meanwhile, Dyche doesn't have him as one of his trusted core of players. You've seen that in the two end of seasons that we've had so far. When push has come to shove, and he's had a full option of midfielders available to him. Amadou Onana doesn't tend to start those big games. You look at that big week that changed everything for Everton in April, where they played Forest, they played Liverpool, and they played Brentford. Amadou Onana didn't start in any of those games. Yeah. So he's someone that if you can get that fee in for early, you don't disrupt the very centre. You don't pull someone from the very heart of the Dyche's plans. You do get the regulatory boost. And then you can have a summer where you go, look, Branthwaite is a £100 million player, and we're going to at least fight for that for as long as we can. Back end of the transfer window, we discussed this the other day, might be a little bit different depending on where the takeover is. They might then become a bit more desperate for money for cash flow reasons. That very much, as I say, depends on where the takeover is. It becomes a different scenario. But you can at least have 6 weeks, 2 months where you're playing a game of saying, you can come in for Branthwaite, but we want proper money for him because he's a proper player, because he is a proper player. The danger has always been that if Everton are in desperate need of a sale for a boost for PSR reasons at this month, he's the only player that someone comes in for, and Everton are left in that really awkward position where it's, do they accept a lower offer to try and avoid another points deduction, or do they, or do they just hold off and try and see if they can muddle through? The weird irony of this, and the kind of just contradictory nature that we discussed so much, and the problems with these PSR regulations is that the mere fact that if Man United were to table a formal bid would then make any punishment Everton would like to get if they were to turn it down more severe, because then they'll have actively chosen not to take a bid to then comply with the rules. So it just becomes even messier.
Some interesting in the Knox Forest appeal, wasn't it? They said that the Commission should look quite kindly on clubs who delay to get the best price. So even if you sold them in July or something like that.
That's it. For sustainability reasons, clubs getting the most money for their players is the most sensible thing. Yeah. But obviously the parameters that are in place as part of these rules don't encourage that. They encourage vultures to circle and vulnerable clubs to target the key points.
I think it might be looked at slightly different if you sold a bit later, even though you breached. I think the general direction now is you should be looked at quite kindly in terms of any punishment.
A lot of people saying that in the comments, take the risk, take the points deduction if it comes to keep your better players.
But this goes back to the other points deduction, doesn't it? That we still not heard about the interest thing. I think, and also as well, I don't want to go down the wormhole of PSR here, but as I said on Monday, the biggest PSR challenge is not this year, it's next year, because we lose a good year from the 3-year rolling programme. So we will need a big cash sale. You know, there's an argument say an Arna and another cash sale. So, or because we sell an Arna now, doesn't necessarily mean the PSR issues disappear. We've got a bigger challenge next year, and that's where you're saying, Joe, about like in some respects, Branthwaite next year might make more sense in PSR terms, but it's all a bit of a mess. I think also with Branthwaite, I think the cash coming into the club is also probably more important than the PSR issue, and we shouldn't forget that, because as we talked about on Monday, we have got cash challenges, haven't we, over the next 3 or 4 months.
Which that's fine, Gav. But I also think, without going down too much of a rabbit hole of PSR, because Joe obviously brought it up, there's a lot of people talking about it in the comments. We are literally being forced to sell one of our better players to meet a financial deadline. How is that sustainable as a football club?
What happens if he wants to go?
Well, okay, that is another point, but I don't think he's
thing,
openly said he wants to go. I don't, he just.
We don't know what he said. Whatever agreed terms means, but what happens if he wants to go to Manchester United?
No, that's fine. Obviously, that's speculation, isn't it? He's only just signed a new contract at the beginning of the last season, didn't he?
That's good for us, though, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, I just think what Branthwaite is going to go, isn't he? Isn't it? We pretty much saying that Branthwaite will go. We'll leave Everton Football Club.
Do we hold out then? For Joe was saying there with the Onana situation, it's like a game of cat and mouse, isn't it? It's like you go.
The problem is that bit only works if someone also comes in for Onana before the end.
Exactly.
It's just really difficult.
So how long do we wait?
But
then you say, do we wait till after June now, the deadline, this financial deadline that have been put on the club to say, well, we can get. We're being lowballed by a club because a rival, because they know they can get a quality player for less money.
The incest here comes into it, doesn't it? Really, we just don't know. But I think the cash thing is also mightily important here as well. So I'd wait and see. But if he wants to go, he will leave Everton only over the next 12 months. I think that's pretty much well established.
It's just annoying, Gav, isn't it, to be honest? I mean, I'd resign myself to it, but, when the news kind of broke last night, and we must confirm that there's nothing being confirmed either way, do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, it's nothing being confirmed, and I mean, bids and things. I don't think a bid has been submitted or anything like that for him. There's going to be a degree of cat and mouse and a lot of sounding Everton out and just trying to see where their parameters are. I think most of the reports at the moment based around, Everton have set a high value that Manchester United aren't willing to reach. And the reality is there's probably briefing wars going on from both sides there as they both try and, fight for the best deal. Manchester United have interest in other centre-backs as well, and they're probably having the same conversations around each of them, trying to work out which will, in the next 10 days or so, prove the best option for them. But obviously, what that does do is it destabilises the situation at Everton. I think one thing that's interesting, because we're in a situation where Dominic Calvert-Lewin may well have interest this summer. He's entering the last 12 months of his talks, and he's got a new contract offer on the table from Everton. All these discussions have started over that. And when you look at that situation and you look at the Jarrad Branthwaite one, obviously 2 players that are absolutely pivotal to anything that Everton want to do on the pitch. I think one of the things that I think will be really interesting this time round is one of the lessons that Kevin Farwell says he's learnt since he came to Everton, and that was from the Anthony Gordon saga. Anthony Gordon went to Newcastle at the back end of the January transfer window, at which point Everton had a big influx of money, and there was a belief within Everton that they could use some of that to spend to strengthen if they could find the right player. Those beliefs are probably, with the benefit of hindsight, a bit more questionable, because we know that they breached PSR anyway. If they'd have spent money in that January transfer, they'd have breached it. Would have made it even worse. So obviously, who knew what at Everton remains, throughout the last few years, remains a kind of a live issue as to who's getting what advice and providing the guidance, etc. But one of the things that he came out after that as saying was that he would probably learn from that the importance of setting a deadline for a player and saying, any clubs that are interested, you've got to come in it by this point, otherwise we're moving on without any idea. Without plan to sell them, because obviously one thing that they have to do is they have to protect Everton's summer and Everton's squad and Everton's plans, and what we can't do and what Falwell can't do. Or we need to at least avoid, try everything they can, and if Everton aren't in a strong position in this respect, they can't end up in a summer where there's 2-3 months of will they go, won't they go, and then it ends at the back end of the transfer window with him going. But Everton having been unable to prepare for their departure and starting the season weaker.
Okay, I mean, Gav, there were contrasting reports last night. It was, Manchester United have opened talks. Branthwaite agreed a deal. We don't know, but there's I think a fair comment. I think Everton probably should stand up for themselves if this is the case. But if terms have been agreed, is that not classed as tapping up? That's a question from Sean Dovey.
We don't know the full circumstances, do we? Poaching is the word, I think.
Poaching.
Possibly, yeah. I can't comment because I don't know the circumstances, what communications has been, but it does seem a little bit strange, and there's obviously several movable parts.
There's no smoke without fire.
Yeah. Do you think Branthwaite being excluded from the England squad has sort of made it more urgent for him to leave Everton?
I don't think it's made it more urgent for him. I think the reality is he's a player for England's future. He should be a player for England's present, really. But he's a player for England's future. Where it makes an impact is it means that he isn't being distracted by a tournament and all the logistical and technical issues that then that has for trying to sort any deal out. Those hurdles have been removed, probably to the detriment of Everton. If they have concluded that they need to sell him, then maybe not. But I think that at the moment, look, we've known for a long time there's interest in Branthwaite. We're now at a point where clubs can actually act on that interest. We know Manchester United would like him. I expect a lot of speculation over the course of the coming days, and certainly to at least the end of this month. And we know that Everton, we know that Man United want him. We know that Everton are vulnerable at this present moment in time to serious bids for their players. We know that because Kevin Fowler came out before Sheffield United and said, "Look, we expect to sell players this season," and we know that because everything that we've seen in everything that's been put out there in the public domain and around finances, whilst there is a lot of grey area and whilst there are things that we don't know about, we know far more than we ever normally would because of the PSR hearings and the details that have been made public as a result of them. And we can all sit back and say, as much as everyone might want to put up a fight over players, they're in a difficult position going into the end of this month.
We should have put our mortgages on these reports circulating at the back end of this week. Branthwaite not getting in the England squad. Ten Hag obviously staying in the role. Obviously Everton needing money and the transfer window opening today. Should have put our mortgages on that these reports were coming out.
Well, they're always going to, and
specifically this week though.
There's a significant. There's always a massive transfer rumour mill, isn't there? And the circumstances at Everton and Manchester United are conducive to there being a big discussion over Jarrad Branthwaite and any potential move there. So, it's fully expected. There's no doubt about that. But you look at where Manchester United are at the moment. They've only just made the decision to stick with Erik ten Hag.
Yeah.
Earlier on in the week there were lots of reports saying Man United had agreed personal terms with Elise. They are a very noisy club at the moment, and I think they are a club that are very much putting feelers out there in every single direction. That's not to say that all these reports are necessarily wrong, but they're also a club around which there's always a lot of headlines. They have a massive fan base, and there are organisations that thrive off the clicks that you can get that, and not all of them are as I would like to say and there'll be people that maybe disagree with this or laugh at me with this, not all of them are as diligent as what I like to try and be before I report something. So,
Emma EFC, Gav, has kind of agreed with Joe. Anana has already checked out. Dice left him out for a few games and we didn't miss him too much. Sell him and keep Branthwaite at all costs.
Well, I think Anana checked out as soon as he had that stop at Newcastle, didn't he? Remember when he went off? He got subbed, didn't he? And he didn't look too happy. And then I think he got dropped. Yeah, but Branthwaite at all costs up until the end of June. And then, as Joe was saying, it's a different market, isn't it? At the end, at the start of the next season. But Branthwaite's going to go, isn't he really? So, but I don't think there's a position where Branthwaite in 18 months' time, you mentioned the first game at Bramley Moore, I'd be shocked if Branthwaite's there. Let's face it. So, but it's how long you keep hold of him for, and which suits our finances.
Just trying to work out what the best deal is for Everton and when it comes in. There are so many movable parts that's it. United could get all the way up to 11th hour with Branthwaite, and someone comes in with a bid for another Everton player, and Everton look at the finances and think, oh, actually, that bid might take us over the line, so we'll go back to the drawing board with Branthwaite and things like that. I think, look, we're probably, it's hard, and it's always hard to talk about selling players. There is a positive side of this as well. That's Everton have produced, and I know obviously he came through Carlisle, but Everton have had a big part in his recent development. They produced a wonderful player, and even with everything that's been going on over the course of the last season, the last few seasons, they've managed to create a scenario where they have, a 21-year-old lad who is one of the hottest defensive prospects in European football. He's an asset to the club, and any departure that is signed off for him will only strengthen the club as well. Unfortunately, the way in which the sustainability rules, then how it strengthens Everton. If anything, it's another indicator of Everton being more vulnerable to potentially having to sell a player for less than market value towards the end of this month. Is a product of sustainability rules, which is another indicator where they clearly benefit the clubs that already have, rather than necessarily the have-nots. You see that spiral that strengthens top clubs and weakens those that are trying to play catch up, and they are a problem.
But just also as well, the final thing on Branthwaite is also shows the benefits you get from a good loan. When you get loans right,
as in
out. Because he came back a completely different player. I think
they loved him, didn't he?
Yeah, when he went to Holland. So there's conversations to be had about the academy, I know, and loans and so on from the academy. But it's a classic example of a loan for somebody that's benefited them for the year, but it's benefited us even more, and it's benefited him as an individual. So I think that's the other take you'd have.
We're getting loads of questions and comments, so do you want to try and get through as many as possible? Rob Van Man, we said, what a fantastic name. He's commented on the pod. Can you sell a player if they're at the Euros? I don't think there's any issues with selling a player. There's no rules to say you can't.
I think different countries and things have different rules. I think depending, I think some squads and the national teams kind of
allow it or don't allow it.
Basically say you can't touch our players while we're here because we don't want the distractions, and others don't. But there's no doubt that it's easier to talk about the future. It's easier to discuss Branthwaite right now than it is for Onana, because one's away with Belgium right now, and you can understand why you might not want distractions, and also why it'd be harder to thrash out any details when they've got preparations for big games.
Definitely. Gav, I'll come to you on this one. Dave Mack has said Everton should join City and possibly Villa in suing the Premier League. PSR protects the rich clubs cartel and puts clubs like Everton over a barrel to sell cheap. It's a joke. Take the points deduction and don't sell.
I don't think there's the suing, are they? There's a legal case, isn't there? There's a couple of, there's two cases with City, isn't there?
But sorry to interrupt, that does go hand in hand with what me and Connor were discussing on Wednesday, which you mentioned, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, you've got to be careful what you wish for, though, haven't you, sometimes? I mean, City have opened a can of worms there that actually could benefit Newcastle far more than City, couldn't it, really, over the thing about the sponsorship. It's interesting, there was some reports around the City case over the sponsorship deals that Everton were supporting them, and I believe there's they want clubs to be expert witnesses, and they don't they? And there's 10 clubs that have said that they were talking in the City case or make submissions. So there may be support for what City said, as much as like the ludicrousness of their overall message. There is a point that needs discussion, isn't it? Really, is why can't people put on more money than the market value?
Yeah,
because that's what they did in football for 120 years.
It's never been any different.
But you've got to be careful what you wish for, though, haven't you, really, on this, because you may get left behind even further. So it's interesting. Also ties in to, return to Connor on about this outside, is it's an interesting time to take over Everton. What happens if City win? What's the value of Everton then? If you can, and there's a lot of work to be done on that. What happens is if you can put in more money into a club than just normal sponsorship, that might attract other people. I'm just thinking hypothetically here.
That's what I mean.
It does change the structure of how financial regulation, doesn't it, of English clubs, I don't know about the European side, by the way, UEFA, and that might change buyers who come in for you. So that's some way off. But I think over the next this City case, which meant to start next week, the hearing start, and then the outcome of their PSR could change the landscape a little bit of English football and how it's regulated financially, and that may have other people interested.
They're going to be in a timeline going at the same time, though, aren't they? We don't know whether that's going to finish before the takeover comes in or someone takes over the club.
You could take over Everton while that's taking place, and it all pans out, and you find out that Everton are all of a sudden Premier League clubs are in theory worth a little bit more than what they were 12 months before.
Okay, well, we need to move on because we haven't even got to the most important part of the podcast and the takeover, which is Joe, I'm sure, will provide a little bit of an update, but Farhad Moshiri received a new bid. I don't know how to pronounce this, Joe. Is it Vici?
I don't know. Vici. I'll go
Vici.
Vici.
We'll go with Vici. So Farhad Moshiri has received a new bid from a UK investor, Vici Private Finance. The bid involves no borrowed money, and it is believed to have proof of funds of over £1 billion in cash. That was the report circulating last night. What do we know?
Yeah, they're true. They're true. It's not a new. It's more that it's new that details of the bid have emerged
So
as opposed to a new bid. So they haven't come forward this week. They were one of the suitors that were involved last week. Last week they formally submitted it, but because of the nature of these things, quite often it takes a delay to find out because they're complex and a lot of the parties are keeping their cards close to their chest. So we now know that they are another group that have had an offer on the table for Farhad Moshiri to consider. Vici Private Finance, they spent about a year kind of putting something together. I think they were fully incorporated with Companies House in December. They are being advised by Keith Harris, a former deputy chairman of Everton.
I've been waiting for Keith Harris's name.
It's a bid that's been behind the scenes for quite some time. You've been aware that there was a bidder that was working with him to put something together. I just didn't know who. And to be honest, when some of the other bids emerged last week, like the Vici Private one, I wasn't sure if that might have been the one that was advised him or whatever. So I knew that he was involved in piecing something together, just not who it was with. And it now emerges it was this, especially with this new group. But they say they're backed by two billionaires. They said they're fully funded. They said they've got cash ready to go. They've got the funding, they say, for both the short-term and the long-term rehabilitation of Everton. So it's very much something that they want to come in, do what they need to do for the short-term goals, which is obviously stabilise the club, get it on a stronger footing for the move to the new stadium, and then build on that as well, continue that build. They've got a wider vision for the club. So obviously it's a compelling offer. On that count, they've reached out, made overtures to some of the politicians about trying to make sure that they can exploit the opportunity that the new stadium presents for the wider regeneration of the area. So they're saying a lot of good things, and obviously at this stage everybody says everything that you want to hear. Of course they do, but I spent the morning on the phone, and those reports that emerged last night. Paul Joyce from the Times was the one who revealed it. My understanding is that they are all correct. So the current state of play is a very complicated picture, but I know of the bids by Vici Private, so that's the £400 million bid. He's fronting, London-based businessman is fronting a consortium which includes wealthy people from the US as well as apparently a Gulf Royal. That's a rival bid to the Bell and Downing one, which is about £350 million of equity funded by the merchant bank that controls the wealth of the tech billionaire Michael Dell. It's not him saying, I want a piece of Everton, certainly not at this stage anyway. So those two are also on the table. I'm still, if I'm being perfectly honest, a little bit unsure. I'm hearing just conflicting reports on MSP whether they've actually submitted a bid, but the club owe them the best part, the club owe them more than £100 million. So they are someone with a seat at the table and with an influence. I think when their interest is discussed, it has to be remembered that they had the option to, when 777 failed to hit their April deadline for the repayment of the MSP loan, which was one of the Premier League conditions for their approval, MSP had the opportunity to trigger taking the control and stake in Everton. They did not do that. So in terms of what I think even if they have a vision for Everton, it's more to protect their investment rather than a long-term future. And then there's the other one which is of concern, and that's ACAP, who were the money people behind 777. Been a few reports this week that they're floating around the scenes to put a proposal to Farhad Moshiri. This has long been a concern of mine. Wrote this middle of May so before the 777 deal broke down, but when it looked like that was obviously going to happen. The danger with the 777 stuff isn't the following the breakdown of that deal, they represent a credible option for the future takeover of Everton. The problem is that they have put money into a club which, again, gives them influence, buys them a seat at the table, albeit a lesser one than MSP and rights to media funding, who have better security on their loans. But the problem is, Farhad Moshiri spent 9 months entertaining 777. At no point did he think they were a bad deal. He spent most of that 9 months perplexed as to why people thought the state of the club was as dire as it was and why people were raising so many concerns over 777. He never stopped viewing them as a credible partner. So the relationships that were formed then, it's not like the door has been slammed on those relationships. They still exist. And albeit now it might not be one that's going direct through 777, it's the people that were backing them, ACAP. Those networks are still there and they are still in his ear. And what I wrote a month ago was the danger posed by them is probably less whether or not they're a viable, practical solution for a future takeover of Everton. It's more the fact that they remain an influence and they retain influence with Moshiri. And the danger is therefore that they can act as a spoiler to this process. There's somebody else that can have a word, that can delay things, that can distract him, that perhaps make it even longer before Everton end up in a sensible position where a deal can be signed on the dotted lines, and then all of a sudden we can move on with new people in charge that can work towards stabilising Everton and then pushing them on. It's a really complex, writing a piece of them, it's a really complex situation at the moment, and I think that some of the bidders are having trouble trying to work out what Farhad Moshiri's intentions are, what's driving him at the moment. This bid, the latest for details of which have emerged, was also submitted last week, and I think some people were operating on the time frame that they thought there would be a decision that would have been made by now. Others work on the basis that one was going to be made by the end of this week. Obviously, we're getting towards the end of this week now, and that looks unlikely. I think there's a lot of grey area, really, as people are trying to work out where Moshiri's going with this, what's in his head. I know people that are struggling to contact him to try and get updates. There's a lot of silence. People that talk about lots of money in the future of this club, but are struggling to kind of hear back from them. So, from some of the key players or from representatives, they don't know where they stand. And there's certainly a lot of uncertainty from each of the different bids about who else has bid and what the terms are, because obviously there's a lot in the media. There's a lot on, fan media. There's a lot on social media and things like that. Obviously my job's to try and, kind of fight my way through that to give a bit of clarity. That's what hopefully I'm doing. Then the other two parties that have been mentioned in the past, Dan Friedkin, who owns Roma, again, I think he's keeping an eye on things, but I don't think he's submitted anything. And then John Textor, who has been very public in his comments about the opportunity Everton represent. He's been very persistent behind the scenes in his attempts to contact Moshiri, but the big stumbling block, and again said this from the very beginning, before the end of May when he first came out with his comments, the big stumbling block for that has always remained, and still is the fact that he owns 45% of Crystal Palace, and even though he's trying to sell those shares, until he does so, he can't do anything with Everton, and therefore the likelihood of him being able to get rid of them quick enough to be able to move for Everton is very small. So I've always viewed him as not necessarily a bit of a red herring in this, because I think the interest from him is real, but I think really he's a distraction to what's actually going on. So,
I mean, Gav, it's difficult obviously to discuss or go in detail on individual bids. Joe obviously does a fantastic job. I mean, you can go into detail if you want, but just on what Joe was saying there, on the Moshiri point, it's just that for me, it's a terrifying prospect of what he's actually going to do. You just feel he's not going to make the right decision.
Somebody having somebody, as we know from experience, somebody having Farhad's ear is not necessarily a good thing for Everton Football Club.
Well, Joe's said in the past he's easily influenced as well.
I don't know. You have to see it pans out. I mean, what I would say is what I said on Monday is all this bidding stuff. There's a difference between a good bid and a good takeover of Everton Football Club, isn't it? They're two completely different things. I'm interested in the people who can do good takeovers of Everton Football Club in terms of completely restructuring the club, etc. As I said on Monday, and we don't know about that side of it, do we? That's a separate thing. It's a bit like, if Farhad, somebody else apart from Farhad had owned the club over the last 7-8 years and made a complete mess of it, and Farhad now wants to start bidding for Everton like he did in 2016. I am a billionaire or whatever. I've got access to lots of funds. I've been involved in Arsenal. I've had shareholding there. I know about the Premier League. I know how football works and stuff. Money is not an option. You'd be looking at that bid now and go, "Oh, he sounds like give him the dotted line now, But eventually, do you know what Farhad is completely made a mess of it, and that's when people talk about billionaires and they've got £1 billion in the bank, proof of funds and stuff like this, and we've got people who want to invest equity and all this. To me, that's just the cherry on the cake, isn't it? The cake is how they're going to run the football. We don't know that yet, so I personally can't say what's a good bid or not, because I don't know what they're going to do beyond that. You can get some inklings.
See red flags and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course, and you get some inklings about around the people involved and whether you think, we spoke about Andy Bell and George Downing, being Everton supporters and having a bit of insight, and that's fine. But you don't know what the people are going to do beyond that once they got through that first gate. And as I say, Farhad was bidding now, as Farhad in 2016. Say, give him the gig, give him it. He'd pass the owners and directors. That's pretty straightforward, wouldn't he? And so that's the danger in this. People shouldn't be seduced by the money involved and the glamour of it and what people say. That's really not the point here. The point is what they're going to do once they take over ownership, and we don't know about that. Yeah.
Well, we'll only know when they take over.
And then that's the thing, isn't it?
That's the problem.
That's where I would always stay clear of saying phrases like
who's the best.
Bid. Yeah, and who's the best? I don't know.
Well, let's face it. Like as Dave Powell mentioned in his podcast yesterday, Moshiri is really in it for himself. He's trying to get the best deal for him. As far as I can see, and that's how I see it as well. Yeah, and people have said, haven't they? Take some comfort with the fact that he was looking at the MSP deal, with Downing and Bell, wasn't he? To take over equity, that was some 25% equity, and the fact that was blocked by rights and media funding, as something that appeared to be a good decision. At the same time, like they may be the only option, so you don't know. So I haven't got a clue. I mean, the general mood music around from what you read and hear is the fact that he just appears to have extended deadlines and moved the goalpost, doesn't he, and all of this. And
I think one of the other concerns as well is that whilst throughout the 777 deal, he was receiving unsolicited offers, so he knew that he couldn't engage them, but he knew there was some interest in Everton. I think he's been caught by surprise by the amount and to a certain extent the credibility of some of these offers, to the point where I know some people know him who are a little bit concerned that one of the things that he might be thinking right now is, wait a minute, all these credible people want a stake of Everton Football Club. Am I missing a trick here? Is there something that, should I stay around in some, not necessarily, invite other people in, get funding, obviously sell a load of shares or maybe even sell a controlling stake, but in some format, should I kind of, should I keep should I keep a stake here? Should I maintain some influence? Some of the bids there's a danger that some of the bids make him think, wait a minute, am I missing an opportunity here? Should I even
could he get money further down the line? Could he get further money down the line as well if he does that?
777.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's I mean, that's one way of obviously securing, but he's not in a strong position in terms of upfront terms.
Yeah.
It's more the case of there's a danger that he starts to look at these things, think everybody else wants this seems to think Everton's a big opportunity. Mm-hmm. Am I missing something by leaving the club now?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing here is if you give people access, the data room as it's called, somebody might come in and might think, stuff that we didn't know about, and that can put people off, can't it? I mean, that happened with Liverpool, didn't it, before Hicks and Gillette? So, yeah, so there's lots of fences to jump over there before we get to anything, isn't it?
No, yeah, absolutely. And we've got a really good audience, so thank you for watching as we are live. But we have done the hour. I know, Gav, you've got to get off. Joe, you're busy writing. I'm busy producing another podcast this afternoon. So plenty more to come over the weekend. And we've also, just quickly before we finish off, the fixtures come out next week as well. Something to look forward to, I suppose. Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So that's something to look forward to. It's always nice.
One thing which is a bit of good news, I suppose, is the Castore or Castore deal and stuff, isn't it? Is the amount involved. They said that it's a club record, which you'd expect it to be. But they said there's a lot more in the deal because of the tie-in with Bramley Moore and the stadium, and he said about founder member and the commercial, enhanced commercial opportunity for them, for the fact that we're moving to a new stadium and they'll pay for that. And that's a good sign, isn't it, about the benefits that a stadium will bring us that possibly Goodison Park, possibly Goodison Park couldn't. And I think that was a good take for me from that contract announcement. I think that was a bit of good news, and more of that in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, please remember to hit the subscribe button and share this podcast. It's greatly appreciated, all the support that you give us. We're on Apple Pods, we're on Spotify. If you've liked this pod, give us a 5-star, 4-star review. Even if you haven't liked it, give us a 5-star, 4-star review. And follow us on Facebook, which is Everton FC Liverpool Echo. Lads, we will finish off. So, Joe, thank you for coming on, obviously, as always. Gav, thank you for coming in. I've been Ian Kroll, joined by Joe Thomas and Gav Buckland, and this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.